Greetings, everyone, and a heartfelt welcome to the final installment of our LGBTQ plus Elder Services Housing Symposium, aptly titled Defining Aging, a Curated Conversation. We're delighted to see familiar faces and new participants joining us today as we embark on this pivotal discussion. I am Ephraim Getahun, your host and facilitator for this session. My pronouns are they and he, and I proudly serve as the Director of Strategic Partnerships and Training at the Open House LGBTQ plus Senior Center. Today, I come to you live from San Francisco, and it is a profound honor to steer you through this culminating event. Before we delve into today's transformative conversation, allow me to provide some context. Open House was established in 1998, and it remains a steadfast in its commitment to amplifying the voices and experiences of LGBTQ plus older adults, fostering connections and extending support. Our range of services including housing, direct support, tailored community programs designed to address the unique challenges of aging for LGBTQ plus seniors in the San Francisco Bay Area. At Open House, our dedication extends to embracing the rich tapestry of LGBTQ plus identities and experiences, with a deep awareness of the intersections of race, ethnicity, class, culture, HIV status, sexual orientation, gender identity and expression, spirituality, and ability. Within our community, each individual is a valued member. Today marks a departure from the traditional speaker-centered format we've employed thus far in our series. Instead, we embark on a curated conversation Who is senior? Culturally reflective definitions of aging. In this session, we will explore the profound impact of identity and trauma on the aging process, discussing critical topics such as the movement to lower the federal definition of senior to 55. This change could render more LGBTQ plus elders and of color and other vulnerable communities eligible for supportive housing, services, and care. We will also shine a spotlight on the pivotal role of housing and services as interventions for LGBTQ plus elders in the current climate, outlining policy priorities and avenues for involvement in local community advocacy. Before we proceed, let's acknowledge the significance of today. This session represents the culmination of our series, where we strived to offer valuable insights into LGBTQ plus aging and housing. Whether you've been a part of our journey from the beginning or you're joining us for the first time, we trust that today's dialogue will be engaging and enlightening. In this discussion, we will build upon the wisdom gleaned from our previous sessions by convening community advocates, housing and aging experts, and service providers. Our session today is aptly titled, Who is Senior? Culturally Reflective Definitions of Aging. Together, we will explore the stark realities of increased cognitive decline among LGBTQ plus elders compared to their straight and cisgender counterparts. Against the backdrop of today's political landscape, we will illuminate the undeniable correlation between oppression and declining health in our aging population. As we navigate this conversation, it's essential to recognize that aging takes on different dimensions based on one's lived experiences. To shed light on these pressing issues, we will be joined by a distinguished panel of experts. They will delve into the nuances of the movement to redefine senior and the profound implications it holds. Additionally, we will emphasize the paramount importance of housing and services as interventions for LGBTQ plus older adults in the current socio-political climate. Throughout this session, we will identify key policy priorities and provide insights on how you can actively participate in local community advocacy. Before we immerse ourselves in this dialogue, I want to acknowledge the land that I am addressing you from, the traditional, ancestral, and unceded territory of the Ramaytush Ohlone people, originally known as Yelamu. Paying homage to this land and its indigenous heritage is an essential step, and it underscores our collective responsibility to address historical injustices. I really genuinely encourage you to reflect on your connection to the land you inhabit, wherever you are in the States, and consider participating in local voluntary land taxes as a meaningful act of restitution. Now let's cover some logistical details. Thanks to InterpreNet, we have English and Spanish captioning, and thanks to Interpret That, who is providing live ASL interpretation. If you encounter any technical issues or have questions, please don't hesitate to use the chat feature to reach out to our dedicated team. Your experience here today is of utmost importance to us. Together, let's embark on this final leg of our journey. I cannot believe we've been through 4 weeks and it's almost over. Thank you for being a part of this critical conversation. Let's work collectively to ensure that today's session is meaningful for everyone involved. Friends, it is our distinct pleasure to introduce our esteemed panelists for today's discussion. Each of these individuals brings a wealth of knowledge and experience and passion to the table, and we are truly honored to have them with us. Our first panelist is Jupiter Peraza, she, her, a transgender activist, organizer, DACA recipient, and thought leader on a range of social justice issues, including trans civil rights and immigrant advocacy. Jupiter earned her BA in International Relations and a minor in Political Science from San Francisco State University in May of 2022. She's currently on track to complete her master's in International Relations at the same university in spring of 2023. Jupiter. Jupiter's journey in San Francisco local politics began in 2018 when she started working at Manny's, a civic community space in the Mission District. As events manager, she spearheaded nightly programming on local, state, and national socio-political issues. covering topics from climate change advocacy to immigrant rights, tenant protections, LGBTQ plus civil liberties, economic equity, and much, much more. In 2020, as Manny's Director of Community Initiatives, she orchestrated over 1,000 events for a national phone bank, letter writing campaigns to swing states, and sent over 1 million text messages in support of Joe Biden and Kamala Harris. At the start of 2021, she traveled to Georgia to canvass for US Senate candidates Raphael Warnock and John Ossoff with New Georgia Project and Magenta. After playing a pivotal role in the elections, Jupiter shifted her focus to the transgender district, the world's first legally recognized transgender district based in San Francisco's Tenderloin district. Here, as a program associate, she led the Housing Opportunities for Transgender Tenants, also known as HOT, pilot housing subsidy program, which provided housing for transgender, gender nonconforming, non-binary, and intersex individuals in the SF Bay Area. She also organized a COVID-19 vaccine activation in the Tenderloin for vulnerable residents. In 2021, as Director of Social Justice and Empowerment Initiatives at the Transgender District, Jupiter spearheaded the effort to designate August as Transgender History Month in the city and county of San Francisco, receiving formal recognition from Mayor London Breed. Additionally, in March 2022, Jupiter was honored as the 2022 California Senate District 11th Women of the Year by California State Senator Scott Wiener. Notably, in April of 2022, she graduated from the Women's Foundation of California, Dr. Solis Policy Institute Fellowship. Jupiter, please take a moment to greet our audience. That is such an impressive bio, and we are so happy to have you.
Thank you so much, Ephraim. Wow, that was such it was a very compact and very dense introduction, but nonetheless, thank you so much. Thank you for having me in this session. I am very excited to speak with the other panelists, so thank you.
Yeah, so happy to have you, Jupiter. Thank you. And I would love to introduce our second panelist, Dr. Jason Flatt, he, him, they, them, an assistant professor at the University of Nevada, Las Vegas, School of Public Health, Department of Social and Behavioral Health. Dr. Flatt's research focus on understanding the concerns and needs of diverse LGBTQIA+ individuals living with Alzheimer's disease, Parkinson's disease, and their care providers. In addition to their research, Dr. Flatt is actively involved in local efforts to increase opportunities for affordable and welcoming housing for the LGBTQIA+ community. His work is supported by prestigious organizations such as the National Institutes of Health, National Institutes on Aging, the American Federation for Aging Research, Alzheimer's Association, and the Michael J. Fox Foundation. Dr. Flatt is also a key contributor to the TheRiseRegistry.org, the first NIH-funded registry for LGBTQIA+ people experiencing memory loss or caring for someone with memory loss. Their work has been featured in notable publications including NPR, US News and World Report, The Advocate, Newsweek, and at the Alzheimer's Association. Dr. Flatt, please take a moment to say hello. Thank you so much for being here.
Hi, Ephraim. Thanks so much for having me. I'm so excited to be here with you all today and talk about some important information for our community. So thank you.
Yes, thank you so much for being here. And now our final, but definitely last or least, I'm so excited to invite Andrea Horn to the stage. Andrea, she, her, an individual with a rich and diverse background. Andrea is a former actress, a model, jazz singer, and a longtime San Francisco resident. She currently serves as the Community Engagement Coordinator, or used to, at Curry Senior Center, and has always been an active community member and activist within San Francisco. Having lived and worked in San Francisco for over 40 years, Andrea has been a steadfast supporter of transgender women in the Tenderloin. She is particularly passionate about Black trans history and is currently working on a book that delves into the lives of Black trans women who lived from 1836 to 1936. Andrea, I have been personally experienced her magic and her activism, and I am so happy to welcome her to the stage. Please say hello to the people.
Hello, everybody. I'm Andrea. How do you do? I'm glad to be here. It seems like a fabulous event, and I'm here to learn. Thank you
so much. Yes, thank you. We are incredibly fortunate to have such a distinguished panel with us today, each bringing their unique perspectives and expertise to our discussion. So, without further ado, let's dive into this incredibly rich discussion together. In our panel discussion titled, "Who is Senior? Culturally Reflective Definitions of Aging," we delve into the multifaceted aspects of aging within the LGBTQ community. New research has uncovered increased cognitive decline among LGBTQ older adults compared to their straight and cisgender counterparts, shedding light on the critical intersection of identity, trauma, and health in the aging process. Amid the current political landscape, we recognize the clear correlation between oppression and health decline among LGBTQ older adults. Our conversation will explore the diverse ways in which aging is experienced depending on one's unique life journey. Our significant topic of discussion will be the movement advocating for a lower federal definition of what senior is, which is what we want to turn it towards 55. This change would extend eligibility for supportive housing, for services, and absolutely for care to more LGBTQ older adults, particularly those from communities of color and other vulnerable backgrounds. We will explain the potential impact of this shift in policy and its implications for creating more inclusive and culturally reflective definitions of seniorhood. Furthermore, we will highlight the critical importance of housing and services as interventions to support our older adults in the current social climate. By identifying key policy priorities and avenues for local community advocacy, we genuinely aim to empower individuals and organizations to actively contribute to improving the lives of our LGBTQ older adults. We will engage in this thought-provoking discussion that seeks to redefine and celebrate the diversity that we experience. I'm going to begin by turning to Dr. Flatt with our first question. Dr. Flatt, traditional research often relies on conventional definitions of aging. Could you share insights from your research on LGBTQ aging and how it challenges or maybe expands traditional clinical understandings of aging?
Yeah. So I think you raised a really important point around this consideration of, right, age 55 being considered as senior. And it makes me think to some of the research that we're finding for our incredibly diverse LGBTQIA aging community. What we're finding in the research, and you brought up a point even around, right, many people have lived a lifetime of not being accepted for who they are. Systems were not built in mind for our community to navigate. And so a lot of this has created challenges when we think about access to housing, access to jobs, access to healthcare. And so what we have seen for our community is what we call it accelerated aging, or what we would call also as weathering. So what I mean by that is what we would see, right, often for a person that's in their 50s, they look more like a person that's in their 70s when we look at their health. So we might look at things like the chronic conditions that they have and the number of conditions they have, maybe, or limitations in their abilities, right? Issues with maybe mobility or other types of physical impairments. And so we would typically see sort of all of those kind of conditions in someone that's much older, but we're seeing them occur much earlier for our LGBTQIA community members. We think this is because of the historical and current systems, but also the lack of opportunity for care, whether that's preventative or even access to care to take care of a chronic condition. And especially if you do not have stable housing, often you're not able, even to access care. So that's what a lot of the research has been finding. We see this across domains. So if we think, you brought up the cognitive piece, so we do see our community in their late 40s are more likely to be reporting problems with memory and thinking. We're also seeing concerns around isolation, people saying they don't have the support or the people in their lives to rely on to help them navigate the care that they need. So we see it socially, we see it physically, and then we also see aspects around emotional health. So people being more likely to say that they are experiencing poor mood or maybe have been diagnosed with depression. And so when we think about those combined and how they interact, this obviously has an impact on a person's health broadly. And that's why I think that we're seeing sort of this accelerated aging. I also want to point out that this interacts with other identities. So being a person of color, being an immigrant, living with HIV, you bring these different pieces into here and they really can make things even more challenging for an LGBTQIA plus person. So that's what we're really finding. And I'm so glad that they're considering age 55 as a senior. It's so important, especially what we're seeing with our community.
Yes. Thank you so much, Dr. Flynn.
Yeah.
It's really that last part that you had. I mean, everything that you had in that answer was really powerful, but the layers of intersection, right? Because it's not the identity itself. It's not me as a Black person by itself as a Black person. That does not inherently mean that I should have a short lifespan or a less quality of life, but the factors that surround the way that society perceives those identities and the compounding factors. So add layers to that. Not only am I Black, maybe if I'm unhoused or if I was trans, add all of these elements that then kind of create an environment that really perpetuates what you were describing. So I really appreciate
absolutely
very thought out answer. Yeah. Jupiter, I'm going to turn to you for our next question. Your work has spanned local, state, and national levels of politics, as your bio had illustrated for us. Can you share insights into the maybe evolving policy landscape in California and maybe at the federal level regarding LGBTQ plus aging and senior care? How have recent policy changes maybe impacted LGBTQ plus older adults, and maybe even illustrating what further changes we need?
Thank you. And I will say to start off with LGBT policy and advocacy, I am quite optimistic about the future of LGBTQ plus representation and advocacy in our government. However, at varying degrees in the local, state, and the national level. Here in the San Francisco Bay Area, we are very lucky to have representation, very visible representation, such as State Senator Scott Wiener, party chair of the San Francisco Democratic County Central Committee, Honey Mahogany, Assembly Member Alex Lee, and as well as members of the San Francisco Board of Supervisors. We also have devoted supporters and champions of LGBTQ plus issues, such as Assembly members Matt Haney and Phil Ting. We also have that level of representation throughout the state as well. Someone who I have kept an eye out for is Ricardo Lara, who is California's insurance commissioner. He is the first openly gay man to be elected to statewide office. He is also Latino, and he has really great experience to back him up in the work that he does as insurance commissioner. His focus on Medicare for all and equitable solutions to have access to healthcare, especially following a devastating global pandemic, make him an individual that provides such great representation and knowledge and experience that I think it's very much needed in the landscape of LGBT advocacy and policy. He is also a member of the LGBTQ plus legislative caucus, joining other stellar members such as, state senators Scott Wiener and Susan Talamantes. Once again, Assembly member Alex Lee and President pro tempore Tony Atkins. However, at the national level, it's quite a different situation. This past election in 2022, we witnessed over 1,000 LGBTQ plus individuals elected to political office. However, according to the Victory Institute, we need 35,000 more to achieve equitable representation. And at the national level, it's quite concerning because we are seeing so much polarization in our government right now. And that polarization is manifested in wanting to eliminate LGBT people from existence, wanting to eliminate our history, our contributions from society. And that is quite alarming. Because when you begin to invalidate someone's experience and livelihood, it definitely manifests in future opportunities for more discrimination and stigma. However, I do believe that, especially in California and in San Francisco, we are seeing very incredible leadership from organizations and individuals and departments. I will say Open House is one of those organizations that is truly leading in terms of what it means to provide care for our LGBT elders. What does that look like? What are the structures? What are the programs? What is the community that needs to be built to provide that? Open House has been around for a quarter of a century, and that is a true testament of the work that comes out of the organization. Something that I will also be speaking about later on in this conversation is the new study that has been funded by the California Department of Aging, a study that I am a part of in terms of the work that is done here at Open House. And this study is a baseline study on the aging experience of LGBTQ plus Californians. And it is a project that I very much believe in. And I do see the study to be pioneering in many ways. One is that this study designates seniors for those that are 55 and older. This study will also produce open source data that is going to be accessible to anyone. And I really do believe that this study is going to usher in new ways of crafting and ideating policy, not just in the state, but in other parts of the country that I think is very much needed. Policy revolving around transportation, access to affordable housing, and so on and so forth. So I definitely will say that we are in a really great state because there are a lot of policies in place, a lot of elected representatives that really care for the LGBT community, and more importantly, for LGBTQ plus elders.
Thank you so much, Jupiter. It is really remarkable to witness firsthand. We are very lucky to work together. So I'm intimately aware of the work that you're doing with this research study. It is just remarkable to think about the care and attention to making sure that the process is accessible, whether that's language or communities. People are, and I know that you're getting an incredibly overwhelming response, which is exciting because hopefully this type of research will then, because it's really the first of its kind, will then open the doors for others to mirror something similar so that we can get a general understanding of the aging experience across the nation. Because obviously, whether that's environment or other factors, rural LGBTQ plus older adults are going to have a very different experience. Although California does span a lot of different communities. So it's very exciting. I also appreciated the small moment of celebration for the representation that we have. But as always with politics, there's essentially a never-ending road ahead of you. So it's just really powerful to hear the work that you're doing. So I'm so grateful for you. Andrea, I'm coming for you.
Okay.
As a long-standing member of the LGBTQ plus community and a passionate advocate and activist, you've witnessed the evolution of the trans community over the years. Can you share some personal experience or insight into how the experience of aging as a transgender individual differs from that of a cisgender LGBTQ plus individual?
Thank you, everybody. Hi. Let's see. I can tell you that some personal experiences. As I sit here, I'm still watching the door. It's just an unconscious thing because when I was growing up, transgender people, we were always waiting for the police to kick the door in and take us all to jail. That was our life. And so I spent my youth sort of running from the police in 5-inch heels, jumping over fences and pit bulls and all that kind of stuff. This is just to survive. We're hiding from the police and the boys we just had sex with. Yes? Oh, you're just laughing.
I'm just laughing.
And I can only speak to my aging. And I just want to tell people that are listening that they're here. This is as cute as you're ever going to be. So you better work it. Don't wait till you get your titties. Don't wait till you get your top surgery. Don't wait till you get your teeth done. This is it. This is as cute as you're going to get. So I wish somebody had told me that. So I surprisingly, I have several Black trans women friends that are in their 70s, and which is kind of a big deal because statistically, Black trans women are supposed to die at age 35. And so I kept asking myself, why is this group of women, trans women, still alive and thriving, actually? And I came to my answer to my question was they had pretty privilege and they had passing privilege. And that makes a really big difference to your quality of life. And there's I can tell you one other experience that has to do with medical stuff, since we're talking about that kind of stuff. So I was at the doctor's office. I was at Kaiser, and I was seeing a new doctor. And I'm a post-op trans woman, and so the doctor wanted to put the speculum and all that. And so, when someone examines your vagina, there's always has to be someone else in the room nowadays. And so there were two Black women in the room while the doctor checked me. And I didn't think anything about it until later that evening. My husband at the time said, those two ladies, they were laughing about you and talking about you all loud at the reception desk in front of other people. They were saying that right in front of my husband, and he was sitting right there. So I'm only saying that because things haven't really changed that much. You know, it seems on a superficial level, but you see those girls on television, on Pose and everything, they're all beautiful, you know, and that doesn't really answer what happens to girls that aren't beautiful. And we kind of know. And I remember about 30 years ago, I read this book about Marlene Dietrich that her daughter had written. And she said, the daughter said, well, it's when my mother got older, she just wanted to stay in her room and take pain pills. And I thought 30 years ago, I thought, oh, that is so sad. But now 30 years later, I want to just stay in my room and take pain pills too. And so that kind of leads me to kind of isolation. And that a lot of older folks in general face. But I think it's deeper with trans folks, and especially with trans women, because we don't have grandchildren and children to look after us. And so, you know, the natural sort of flow in life. And that's why I think it's really important for us to all connect, all trans people connect, and come up with a new model of loving and support. We don't have to do it like they did, where they leave old people in the dust,
Right.
and leave people that aren't pretty in the dust too. And you know, we've got to come up with a new model. I just remember that this is a little. Am I rambling?
No, you're doing wonderful.
Okay. I do know that I had a doctor for the same doctor for about 35 years. And I had trained him so good. And he was like a Beverly Hills concierge doctor when I got through with him. But anyway, he retired. And I was without a doctor. I didn't have a doctor. And I was like, oh my God, I have to break someone else in. And it's hard to go to a strange new place and see a doctor and tell them all about your personal business. And you don't know how they're going to react. You don't know if it's going to be positive, if they're just going to smile in your face and stab you in the back. That's one of the horrors of being trans and aging. You just don't know. It's just not safe all the time. And you said that I've been a long time community activist. That's true, but it's only been about 20 years. Because 30 years prior to that, I lived stealth, and I had nothing to do with the trans community, except my girlfriends that I grew up with, of course. And so, that just kind of, I was working at Curry Center, and this older man, he came in or something, he was. And he said, I'm 65 years old. I was like, bitch, who ain't? We all 65 up in here. And so, but I just still think that the trans women that were coming, senior trans women, older adult trans women that were coming to my group, I just want to say that they have hopes and dreams. Just like everybody else. And just because you're older doesn't mean that you don't have hopes and dreams. And I just want you guys to remember that as we move forward, because I hear people saying, well, you know, she's 70, she's lived long enough. No, I got more stuff to do. So thank you before I start rambling.
Yeah, no, you're doing great. Thank you so much, Andrea. You touched on several really important things. For the audience, by the way, when we're talking about passing and when we're talking about stealth, we're talking about essentially someone who might be trans, who maybe has done outward transitionary things to make sure that their gender is affirmed, and maybe when they're walking down the street, you wouldn't necessarily be able to tell. And that's important to name, because what Andrea is speaking to is sometimes the privilege that can then come with being able to not necessarily be clocked or recognized as being trans, and the protection that provides. So I just wanted to offer that for anyone who might not be aware. And then you touched on the intergenerational element that would be required, this model of care, because we're talking about traditional family structures, a cis man, a cis woman, they come together, they have a child, and the cycle of life and advocacy for their aging parents happens forever. And so, we have to build something different within our own community as we build our chosen families. And so I really appreciate you highlighting all of that. Thank you so much, Andrea.
You're welcome. Thank you.
To Dr. Flatt. Your work touches on both Alzheimer's and Parkinson's diseases within the LGBTQ plus community. Can you discuss any unique challenges or needs that arise in these communities as individuals age and encounter these health issues? How do these experiences reshape our understanding of LGBTQ plus older adults?
Mm-hmm. Yeah, I think Andrea brought up a really great piece around just access to care as we age and how that changes if you end up your doctor retires or you move or relocate. These are issues that make it challenging. Now imagine if you have memory concerns, or you're having, Parkinson's is considered like a movement disorder, so that would impact sort of your physical abilities. So now imagine you have to not only, right, find this healthcare and ensure that this healthcare is going to meet your needs and welcome you for who you are, but also navigate it with some of the impairments. You might have issues with memory, or you might have issues, right, with your ability to be as mobile as you would like. So we're finding in the research, access to care is a huge issue. The other piece of this is that Alzheimer's disease is the most expensive disease in our country to care for. So when we're thinking about, right, the financial resources of our community, and we've already talked about some of the historical and current aspects, right, of not having equal opportunities for employment. We did not have access to marriage equality, aspects that are important for accumulating wealth or being able to access a partner's benefits, right? So, all of these pieces, when we think about accessing really expensive care, but then weighing that with, I want competent care. I want care that meets me where I am. I want care that makes sure that you accept my chosen family, my friends, maybe it's my neighbor, right? I don't have a spouse or partner. I don't have children. How do I navigate care if I don't sort of fit sort of how these systems have been designed for heterosexual cisgender white people with a lot of money? So that creates a lot of challenges when we're thinking about for our LGBTQ plus community who is living with Alzheimer's or Parkinson's disease. We also know that the current aspects to support our caregivers are not enough. So maybe you have a chosen family member, maybe you're fortunate to have a partner or a friend that you can rely on for care. They need support too. They need to navigate these same systems. And so that can be challenging. We're seeing these amazing models develop. So a shout out for Onlock and Open House for their Community Day program, right? This is an LGBTQIA plus affirming and co-designed adult day program. So this is where people can go and access services. We don't have this across the country, right? San Francisco has this, but many people are aging in communities where they don't have resources that welcome them. And then we often tell people, well, check out your local LGBTQ plus center. The ageism that people experience, right? Discrimination just because you're older. So you're not even welcomed within your own community often. And so those can be additional challenges. Someone, GJ, asked about COVID. So we can think about also the impact of the COVID-19 pandemic on our community, increasing people's challenges with loneliness. But we've also heard that COVID can impact your brain and your health and your memory. And so we're not even at the part of understanding, how does this impact people's lives? We need research on things like COVID, long COVID, and also the disadvantaged kind of experiences that our community faced as they've been navigating this. So we're seeing a lot of these challenges, but I do want to say there's some promising pieces. You talked about the RISE registry. It's one way that we're starting to bring the community together to identify resources. We're also doing research to really make sure that our community is represented. So I'll be talking a little bit about those things, but there is opportunity, and what we need to be doing is advocating for our LGBTQIA plus community members that are living with Alzheimer's or Parkinson's, and making sure they get the support, and that their caregivers, their friends, their chosen family also are supported in this process.
Yeah. Thank you so much, Dr. Flatt.
Yeah.
I had no idea that Alzheimer's was the most expensive. I mean, it doesn't surprise me, right? Oftentimes could be a 15, 20 minute or 20 year diagnosis, and it's degenerative. So it's not like you're curing anything. So you're treating the symptoms that arise with it all the way through the person's unfortunate death. So that's really powerful. And then you mentioning caregiving and its role, but the fatigue that any one caregiver experiences, and especially in our community, when folks are isolated, and oftentimes the caregiver is at a peer level or maybe their partner, and so that further isolates them then from any sense of community. And I don't have the statistics off the top of my head, but I know anecdotally that oftentimes the partners then suffer. The one that is the caregiver then suffers with their own illness due to the stress and the ongoing,
or they can't manage a chronic illness because they're helping someone else, right? So they have to shift their energy to kind of prioritize. It's totally yeah,
thank you so much for sharing that. To Jupiter, as the manager, and you mentioned a little bit about the study, but I'm curious to learn a little bit more. As the manager of the statewide coalition for the LGBTQ plus aging study, could you provide an overview of the key trends? I know you're at the very beginning, but what you're hoping to work with through this research, and how you hope that the findings that eventually come from this research contribute to our understanding of LGBTQ plus aging, and what implications they might hold for culturally reflective definitions of being an older adult.
Yes. What I can share from the development of the survey, because the survey does not launch until November 1st. The survey will be out in the field from November 1st of this year to March 31st of 2024, which is International Transgender Day of Visibility. But what I can share from where we currently are in the development of the survey is that it is developing very, very quickly, and it is developing very comprehensively. Not only are we thinking of how to make this baseline study the best it can be, but we're also thinking about setting up future studies, not only in the state of California, but throughout the country, for success. I will say that one of my main responsibilities in the development of this study is to bring together a group, an advisory committee that is going to advise the research team on how to truly ground this research study in community. And this also, I think that this is very important because there is a very clinical way of studying the LGBT community that I think might not necessarily always produce the most productive data points. So I really love that what this study is doing in the state of California is that this group of individuals that have a very long career in doing advocacy for the LGBT community, whether in healthcare, unemployment, HIV advocacy, housing. This group of individuals, such as Cecilia Chung from the Transgender Law Center, Tony Newman, the former executive director of St. James in Infirmary, Vincent Cristosomo from San Francisco AIDS Services, and many, many more. But what we are realizing in the development of the study is that it is definitely going to stick to the actual experiences of our community. And that is something that I think will produce a data set that I don't think we have at the moment. We barely have any LGBTQ plus representation in the US Census. Although I do foresee that to be changing, I really do believe that we need empirical evidence to truly begin to understand the way that our LGBT community has been left behind by discrimination, by social stigma, and not just from society, but also from the medical field, in employment and in education. So I definitely see this study as reconceptualizing what it means to age gracefully as an LGBT person. And in the same way that I think that learning from LGBT issues, I really think that that is going to snowball into learning about providing more comprehensive solutions to our big picture problems, such as climate change and transportation, and access to education, true education, not revisionist education. So all this to say that I think that this study is going to definitely shift our understanding of what it means to age as an LGBTQ plus person. I will say, in my own personal experience, working with folks at open house and community members who benefit from open house, I see myself reflected in LGBT seniors. I see myself in them because we carry a very similar journey and carry a very similar experience. And I think that that is very important to address isolation and to also build community. And perhaps this is, another topic of conversation for another day, but I really do believe that the conversation that we are having right now, it definitely goes beyond LGBT issues and definitely takes a more widened approach and critique about American culture and how American culture is becoming more individualistic. And because it's becoming more individualistic, we just care about ourselves, and we don't necessarily care about our community members. And that is very much reflected in the way that the government is not really showing up for vulnerable communities that are incredibly impacted right now. And I really love that you mentioned, Ephraim, at the beginning, that oppression is directly connected to declining health. And I really do believe that this study definitely has the opportunity to reveal the data behind LGBT aging, but also to fill in the gaps of this narrative that we are missing, that we have not completed about the discrimination and the stigma that has led us to where we are now. And until we are able to complete that narrative, we won't really know how to fathom and ideate a future. So that is definitely what I can say in terms of what this study can bring forth in, reconceptualization of LGBTQ plus aging.
Yeah. Thank you so much, Jupiter. It's amazing because, our community, we know what our community needs. We know what the aging experience looks like, especially the ones of us, like those of us that work directly with our older LGBTQ community. But unfortunately, we are confronted with a system that requires data. Data translates to the literal dollars that any federal or local government is going to spread out, right? And so there's this bureaucratic process that we have to engage with. And this incredibly culturally informed direction that we're taking at Open House, that you are taking specifically as you support this coalition and the rollout of this research, is going to directly impact our older adults today. And I think it's amazing because there are so many best practices and clinical indications for our cisgender heterosexual older adults. We are at a loss when it comes to the experience of queer aging. And there are questions like, if someone has Alzheimer's and they forget that they transition, what do you do? We're talking, Andrea shared how she had to literally educate her primary care doctor and got him to a place where she was like, okay, my care is excellent. And as soon as he retired, she was at a loss. And every trans sibling that I know at my age is still doing that. They still educate their doctors. And so what happens when a trans elder then or older adult begins to maybe have a cognitive change, and then now they can't do that same advocacy for themselves? So there's so many, it's overwhelming. The just compounding factors, it just piles on. And studies like this are just kind of a gleam of hope, and I'm just so excited for what the results are going to offer as far as how they inform money and how they inform our best practices moving forward. So thank you so much, Jupiter. We're going to enter into our last round of questions. We are just really giving a beautiful conversation. I'm really, really proud of what we're offering here. And so I'm going to turn to Dr. Flatt for our last question. And it's going to be a little bit of kind of a twofold conversation, because a lot of your work has directly intersected LGBTQ plus aging and housing and how those can impact the quality of life of an older adult. But you also recognize, even though your research is clinically based, that aging isn't solely a clinical matter. So while we talk a little bit about the housing piece, I would love to think about how aging is deeply intertwined with social factors. And would you be able to elaborate on the importance of social inclusion and community support in the lives of LGBTQ plus older adults? And how can we then redefine what seniorhood or aging or older adults look like and encompass in these social dimensions?
Yeah. So I think, the first piece with housing of what we're finding is just when we think holistically about its impact on a person's being is really important. For many community members have talked about the fact that, worrying about housing, worrying about paying rent, worrying, will I, get a rent increase coming, when it's time for my lease to renew. These pieces add a lot of stress and worry, especially if you live in an expensive city like San Francisco or New York or Los Angeles. These are areas that really, make it more challenging for our LGBTQIA plus community. But these are also cities that are traditionally more welcoming to our community. And so people want to age in place in a community that they belong to, that they've grown older to, they have connections and support systems. And so, focusing on housing can be so important to ensure that our LGBTQIA plus aging community can stay in the communities that they love and where those communities promote their health. So some of the research around housing we've shown in terms of health, we found I have some quotes from people, right? They talk about like, my mood has gotten better and my health has improved. Just living in this housing has allowed me to take better care of myself. Other people talk about, right, that the sense of connection of being in this community. So saying like, if you're depressed, you come out here and one of our neighbors says hello to me. How are you going to be depressed if you have community members around you knowing that they're there for each other and that they can support you? There are these really unique support systems that are created in this housing that just is happening naturally because our community knows that we need support. So someone may have a medical procedure, maybe they've had surgery, so they're not going to be able to prepare meals or go grocery shopping. I've heard from people living in open house, my neighbor went grocery shopping for me. My neighbor threw a load of laundry in when they did their own laundry. These little things that we don't think about. This might just be one thing that can add to your life to make it a little easier, but also to support you as you're going through something that's challenging. Knowing that you have people that you can just count on is so important. And so we're seeing that that's what this housing is doing. It's creating community again, right? We're seeing a major focus, I think, right? We heard, that our society is becoming so individual focused, individualistic, right? In terms of just, and so we're losing this connection. We're losing sort of communities. And so by creating this housing, I think there's an opportunity to recreate community, bring people together. That doesn't mean it's going to be easy. There's going to be challenges. There's going to be bumps. There may be people like you don't really love that neighbor next door. But if they need your help, you're going to hold the door open for them. You might grab their mail, right? So there's still these opportunities for support. And so I think that housing for our community is so important in connecting people to resources, connecting people to social opportunities, but also ensuring as we age that we can get the care and support that we need. And so that's something that we're finding from the research that this housing is doing and is really unique and really needed. In terms of thinking about our definitions of sort of what is senior or what should we be thinking, I'm going to put a call out of like, we need to be talking to our LGBTQIA plus aging community members. How do they want this defined? I would say that most people say they feel the same age that they did when they were in their early, earlier in life. People don't feel that they're older. It may be just that their body maybe limits them in a way that's different than what it used to. I often think it's really hard to generalize, and I've heard this from community members, but I've even noticed this in my own work with the community. When you sort of think about generalizing, right? Meet people where they are. You've met one LGBTQIA plus person. You've only met one person. Right? You need to ask about their needs. You need to ask about the language they want to use, how they want, what services they need, how they want to be connected, understand their story, their dreams. Andrea shared, right? I've got views. I may be in my 70s, but it's not over. I want more. And we need to be thinking about that, right? Just because someone's older doesn't mean that we should be thinking about them at the end of their life. They have history, wisdom, so much that they can contribute, and they've been fighting for our rights from the beginning. And so we need to learn from them, and we need to honor them and make sure that we care for them just as they've cared for us and allowed us to have the rights that we currently have today. And so when we're thinking about defining this, we need to be thinking holistically about who they are and making sure that they're at the table and represented in how we think about a senior and thinking about the language we use.
Yeah.
So yeah.
Beautiful. Yeah, it's really that last comment that you just ended with. It is true. I mean, we are constantly toiling with what language to use, right? Some people might use elder, older, adult, senior, community member flat out because they don't even want their age to necessarily be a descriptor in the moments that you're meeting someone. And that piece that you were talking about, how people feel. I mean, my internal dialogue has been the same, right? It maybe learn some new vocabulary, and I might be able to express my thoughts a little more clear. But it's the same dialogue that I remember existing when I was 8. So I imagine when I'm 60 and then when I'm 80, that internal dialogue is going to be the same. The personhood is different from the body with which it exists in, because this is now.
And the experiences you've had, right? The richness that has shaped your view, but you are this same person.
Exactly. Exactly. Thank you so much for that insight.
Yeah.
In my excitement of getting through these questions, I realized I skipped Andrea's second question. So I want to give Andrea an opportunity to answer this question before I jump to Jupiter's last and then Andrea's last. And so Andrea, as I turn to you, transgender history is a subject you are deeply passionate about, and you are currently writing a book on Black trans history, as I mentioned earlier. How does preserving and being a steward and celebrating the history of transgender individuals contribute to a more inclusive and culturally reflective understanding of aging within the trans community?
Thank you for that question. I'm going to start, and I'm going to answer that by with a couple of quotes, if I may.
Sure.
Carter G. Woodson, who was a Harvard-educated Black man that created Black History Month. And he says, if a race has no history, if it has no worthwhile tradition, it becomes a negligible factor in the thought of the world, and it stands in danger of being exterminated. And that's why trans history is so important. We need to be able to say the names of our transcestors, just like we can say George Washington and Thomas Jefferson and Abraham Lincoln. These are our heroes. They are the ones who made it possible for us to be here today. Miss trans icon Miss Major said, we got to reclaim who the fuck we are. That's what she said. And she said another time, we are a people and they just can't run over us. And we are a people and they just can't run over us. And we need our history. It grounds you in your life. And we are gender nonconforming people out here floating around with no history. We have history. We just have to go find it. I had no idea how hard writing a book was, but anyway, I'm to that. And I just wanted to speak to Dr. Flatt that I have had a tremendous amount of memory loss since I had COVID twice. I can really feel how it affects my thought process, which is a really interesting place to be. I'm sort of objectively looking at myself, and it's different for me. Life is different for me. I can't really seem to. I'm just sharing this. This is anecdotal, but this is important. I can't hold. This is since COVID. I can't hold, which I don't think it's aging necessarily, but maybe it is. I don't know. I can't hold more than one thought at one time in my head since COVID. That's just something to remember. And this country, we're also taught not to respect our elders. Because I know I was an asshole when I was young to older people. So that's just it's not part of our culture. So many cultures older people are revered, but
Mhm.
in our culture, older people are discharged, like jetsam and flotsam. Those are like boat things that throwing off, and no one wants to hear it.
Mm.
And there are trans women from 1550. Her name was
Wow.
Victoria, Black trans woman in Lisbon, Portugal. And the only reason we know about her is because she was brought before the Portuguese Inquisition because she had men lined up outside her house to get in. And the old priest brought her before and so it's before this Portuguese Inquisition, which I didn't even know there was a Portuguese Inquisition. I knew about the Spanish Inquisition, but I didn't know there was a Portuguese Inquisition. But I think they started it just for Victoria. There's a book out called Boy Wives, Women Husbands, and it's about queerness on the continent of Africa
Mm.
and pre-contact. And there's a passage in it that says that beautiful boys dressed as girls that look like girls were prostituting in Addis Ababa
Mhm.
2,000 years ago.
Yep.
So we're nothing new, but if nobody tells us, then we won't know, because we can't wait for straight cisgender to tell us how fabulous we are.
Exactly.
Because when I was growing up, being trans meant you were fabulous. Your politicalness was just that you existed and you showed up.
Mm.
That's what you don't need. So I just want to say this. I'm scared to death of Alzheimer's, to tell you the truth. But I just also want to say, working in the Tenderloin for the last 3 years, I saw many trans people, mostly trans women, that isolate in these SROs downtown, and we can't get to them because they're afraid to be got to. I don't want to like out them on the street,
Right.
So, but I know they're probably all alone, and I appreciate Open House's efforts of trying to connect older adults with queer kids. And
Yeah.
I don't know how successful that has been, but we still need to keep doing that, because one day we will make that connection and it'll all fit together and sink in. And our young queerdos will be here for our older queerdos, because who else is going to take care of it? Who else is going to look out for us? And
Exactly.
we fought the motherfucking police, so y'all could skip down the street holding hands, singing "Skip to My Lou, My Darling."
Thank you so much, Andrea. It's really powerful being a steward and a historian in this way, because what you mentioned, even the capital of Ethiopia, Addis Ababa, that's where my family's from, right? I'm Ethiopian, and most Ethiopians today would die on this hill that queerness is this Western ideology that
The
never existed.
contemporary Africans say that Europeans brought homosexuality, but what they brought was homophobia and transphobia.
Exactly. And so it is amazing. And I have done my own research, and that there was a third gender in some of the tribes in Ethiopia. And so right there, when we've had so much of our history eradicated, that's what current political, polarization does, because there's this fabrication that being queer is a new idea. And so then you mentioned someone from the 1500s, and that just really illuminates. And then when you think about the intergenerational gap, many of us are lost. If you look at my peers, we are lost because there has been a gap of where wisdom would traditionally be passed down from generation to generation. And there is a chasm that exists now between LGBTQ plus young adults and our aging population as well. So thank you so much, Andrea, for that. That's really, really powerful. I'm so glad you're writing this book, and I'm so excited to read it when it's ready. Jupiter, for your last question, You've been recognized for your outstanding contributions, including being named the 2022 California Senate District 11th Woman of the Year. How can recognition and advocacy just like this at both the state and local levels further the cause of LGBTQ plus aging? And how does this recognition contribute to changing cultural perceptions of seniorhood in our community?
First of all, I want to say that I am definitely very grateful and honored to Senator Scott Wiener for his recognition of me as a Woman of the Year last year. And I remember vividly when I received the call that he wanted to honor me. I had this thought in which I was like, was anybody else not available? Like, what is going on? Although I am very proud of of my advocacy and what I've done for my community, I understand that I am merely a conduit to the incredible pioneering work that has happened before me. Right. I obviously would not be here without the leadership and the advocacy of individuals like Miss Andrea Horn and others that I very much look up to. And however, I definitely accepted this honor as much more of a responsibility to ensure that I was representing my community with the best, with sort of the best leadership that I had within me. Because I also understood that as we are entering new spaces that we haven't been before, and that it's very uncommon for us to have been historically, I definitely see this as an opportunity to break those conceptions that trans people are only sex workers, that trans people are uneducated and do not have access to education, so on and so forth. And although those notions have been changing drastically over the last few decades, it is something that it's still ingrained into the mainstream. And I think that it should definitely keep evolving and changing. And, as Ms. Andrea Horn mentioned, we have great representation in media like Pose, but also Pose is not entirely it's not grounded in reality now. And I think that in order to shatter those notions, we really have to ground experiences in the work in the now into what is going on with folks that are working on, on history and cultural heritage preservation, and in housing and in Medicare and so on and so forth. And I think that I do think, however, that everything is interrelated. Ms. Andrea Ford mentioned about the reality of SROs, and because they are so common in San Francisco, I think that it is something that I think is creating further isolation and more and declining in health and cognitive ability. So how then is it that not only are we going to address that about our community, but also how is San Francisco going to evolve in terms of providing so much more to trans people other than SROs that are dilapidated, that are falling apart, and that are not sustainable, and that are not just, and that are not fair. So I will definitely say that, as I mentioned, that it's definitely a responsibility to represent my community in the work that I do, but it is something that I do very proudly. And I also take time to ensure that I am grounded in the folks that I look up to. And I think that aligning ourselves, and not necessarily aligning ourselves, because I think it's important to also hold our elected representatives accountable for truly showing up for our community in ways that we are asking them to. I think that it's incredibly a special moment in which we have the door open engage our elected representatives and speak with them and actually be heard. So that is something that I think is changing cultural perceptions of not just our community, but of how we are evolving with this relationships that we're also building, and inherently how we are aging with these relationships that we are fostering.
Beautiful. Thank you so much, Jupiter. It really is powerful because it is all in sequence, right? We just landed where we are in time. And it's really beautiful to honor those that have done this work, that have led this work to where we are permitted to then continue and take that torch and run with it. And I just want to say that GJ in the comments said a really important thing, and I'm going to raise this, which was, I appreciate the call to responsibility, but I do hope that Jupiter took time to feel celebrated and honored as well. Because it is important to, I know that your eye is always ahead of where we need to go and what needs to be done, but it is an incredible honor. And I hope you have taken that time to celebrate yourself because you deserve that. Absolutely. So thank you so much, Jupiter. Andrea, we have our last question for you. And your question is really to tell us, those of us on the younger side of the spectrum of the LGBTQ plus community, what advice you might have for us, what things you've noticed, maybe gaps in support that can be a call to action or a rebuke, if that's what you desire. But yeah, anything that you have to offer.
I could share one story that I think is rather significant. I was working in the Tenderloin with trans women, and someone asked me, Andrea, how come the trans women that come here, they're always so squirrely? And I was like, I don't know, actually, but I've noticed that myself. So a girl came in, and she told me she was having trouble getting her hormones from Walgreens at Market and Van Ness. So this is 10 years ago. So I went with her, and behind the lovely Filipino lady behind the counter, if anyone knows, has Filipino friends and they don't really have pronouns. And so they usually often get them mixed up in English. Mm-hmm. And so they called her he, but they didn't mean to insult her. It was just how it turned out. And so she was already off on that. So I explained the pronoun thing, and we were on our way 5 blocks back to the office. She got her hormones. And the first block, someone said to her, bitch, I'm going to kick your ass. And I said, do you know them? And she said, no. So just kept walking. The next block, someone said, how much? I said, do you know them? She said, no. The next block, someone said, you're going to be my girlfriend. You're going to be my bitch. And I said, you know, no. And so I could go on. By the time we got back to the office, I was like a nervous wreck for her. And so that just goes to let you know what these girls go through on the daily. Now, it didn't bother me because they just thought I was her mother or something, but so many girls live in that place. And really, those are the ones we're trying to reach here, and the ones who need us more than they even know. And trans women of color are so used to not getting any help at all that they don't even know they can ask for it. Also, about 10 years ago, there was the Jewish Vocational Center, and they had gotten a grant to train trans women to do something. I forget what it was, but everyone got a computer and da-da-da-da-da. And there was a big thing. And I was recruiting my ass off all over town to get people to come to this training. And they paid you. So the day was there. I'm there all early. Oh, you're coming. It's going to be fabulous. Nobody showed up. Not one girl showed up. I was heartbroken. I was embarrassed. And I just kind of left with my head between my, however that goes. And about 2 weeks later, I saw one of the girls on the street, and I was like, how come you didn't come that day? We were so waiting for you. Everything was set up for you. She said, oh, we were all there. It's just that the security guards wouldn't let us in the building because our IDs didn't match. It's so sad, right? That is so fucked up. And so they lost that opportunity. People, Jewish Vocational Service, they're not going to do it again. You know, I couldn't convince them that it was the security guards that stopped the girls that for coming up. But so the other question was how these experiences may differ from those of cisgender LGBT. I'm not quite sure, but I know that cisgender gay men and lesbians, they don't have to be afraid to go to the doctor. They don't know if they're going to get turned out or misgendered or called by their birth name, or, you know, there's so many factors. I told you guys earlier that my doctor had retired, and I went for a year without a doctor. And not taking care of myself and not going to seek medical help when I needed it because I was afraid. And that's me sitting here talking to you guys. I was afraid because at Kaiser's, like, oh God, they're going to be. So it's hard to explain all that kind of stuff. And yeah, so I think that's kind of like the biggest difference. It's just kind of the fear factor. You never know how you're going to be received. Yeah. And it's a scary place to be. And it's a place that, so anyway, I went without doctor's care for a year. So after about a year, I got really sick. And when I finally got a doctor a year later, it turned out that I had 3 infections in my kidneys and my bladder. And I'm just running around sick with diarrhea and stuff because I'm afraid to go to the doctor. And I'm privileged. And so I can imagine if that happens to me, how much it must happen to my siblings who don't have the privilege that I do, the passing pretty privilege and all that stuff. And so, and Dr. Flatt, I am scared to death of Alzheimer's. Every time I forget something, I'm like, ah!
And I know that that's a common fear with lots of people, but specifically for the trans experience for many, many reasons. And it's really powerful how you illustrated that walk from this person's home to the office and the amount of layers of abuse just to get through the door to get access to something. So imagine, an older adult who happens to be trans maneuvering through the world just to walk through all of that crap, to walk into the doctor's office just to be dead named as soon as they walk in there. And I think what some of the advice that I'm hearing in that is the level of compassion that we absolutely need to pull on when we're encountering something that we may not have contributed to in that interaction, but we're receiving a response that's completely warranted for the world that individual lives in. And so really thinking about that, this other individual's experience and kind of stepping into their shoes. So thank you so much, Andrea.
You're welcome.
We are going to transition into a Q&A. I know we only have a few more minutes left in this program. We've had such a beautiful, robust conversation, so I'm not even sorry about it. But I want to thank Dr. Flatt, Jupiter, thank Andrea for such an incredible and enlightening conversation. Your expertise and insights have added so much depth to this program and to this conversation. Who is senior? Culturally reflective definitions of aging. I already see a bunch of questions in the chat, so I'm going to go ahead and pull from those. If folks have questions, and maybe we'll have time to grab into them, you can use the chat feature to reach out to us and we will answer those questions. There are lots of different questions. Some of them were spoken to as we were answering them. For example, Dr. Flatt spoke to COVID-19 and its effects on aging. But there was an interesting question that I saw here that I'm actually just going to answer, if that's okay, from Christy Woods, who asks, how much of the trans woman of color statistics, and I think it's Black trans women specifically, and the life expectancy at age 35 is actually true? And later on, Christy does comment that it's not necessarily doubting it. It's just about what does that standard mean for the perception of a young trans person growing up. And what I would say to that is there is actually a lot of discourse on that statistic. There's been some difficulty identifying where that actually came from. And unfortunately, we do have to rely on anecdotal experience in this arena because there's no research. We've made trans people entirely invisible. And so I'm sure if we've taken the time and done the research, we may come with a more accurate number. But even from my anecdotal experience, I have so many trans siblings, and in community, I know of a complete disproportionate life expectancy or life, quality of life in my trans siblings. So that's a good point. I'm glad we were able to raise that. And we don't have an answer because no one's cared enough to research it. So that maybe that's more of a call to action, but I do appreciate the perspective of what that might offer a young trans person growing up. So thank you for that question. Another question from GJ. How much tension do our panelists experience about the term senior as opposed to elder, or any number of cultural terms that do not resonate for everyone? If anyone wants to answer that, maybe Andrea, if you want to answer that. I know that we had a conversation about this word.
What you talking about, Willis? What was the question?
About essentially the terms towards aging.
Yeah. Well, I know, just like I didn't know I didn't like the term elder until it was applied to me for this particular event. I'm like, wait, I don't want to be I'm not an elder. I may be old AF, but I'm not an elder. And so it's a subtle difference. It's not really much of a difference, but it's, words and what we're called are important, because of, the pronoun thing that's really prevalent right now. Because when I was growing up, everybody was she. Mm-hmm. So your dad was she, the dog was she, your car, where is she? And so it made it so much simpler. But anyway, back in the 80s when I was a young girl.
No, thank you for that. It is true that it is so cultural. And so you're going to get a different reaction. And I think similar to what Dr. Flatt was speaking to as far as person-centered curation when it comes to care. In that same way, we will want to think, because we don't want to blanket the experiences of all people that happen to be older than 55 or 65 or, wherever we're defining that age group. And so really turning towards the individual and honoring how they want to be referenced. And so that's just going to take some inquiring and genuine connection with folks and asking questions and caring about what they have to say and then defining it that way. So we are at the close. I know that there were more questions, and I'm so sorry we're not able to get to them. But I do want to, again, thank you so much, panelists. It has been an honor to facilitate this conversation. As we draw this enlightening session of this panel to a close, I want to extend yet again my deepest gratitude to our panelists, Dr. Flatt, Dr. Jupiter, and Andrea. Your insights, your experiences, and wisdom have cast a bright light on our symposium. I can't believe we are at the end of this 4-week session, and we are profoundly honored to have had you as our speakers for this final one. I'd also like to express heartfelt appreciation to the teams at InterpreNet who provided invaluable captioning services, and Interpret That who ensured that our event was accessible through American Sign Language interpretations. Your unwavering dedication to accessibility has made it possible for a broader audience to engage in these crucial discussions. Furthermore, a special thanks to our dear partners, to our esteemed partner organization, SAGE, for their consistent support and collaboration throughout this entire symposium as we planned throughout the year. Together, we have made a significant impact on the lives of LGBTQ+ elders. We want to also acknowledge the generous contributions of the Harry and Jeanette Weinberg Foundation, those whose support made this symposium possible. Their commitment to initiatives benefiting our community is immeasurable, and we are deeply appreciative of their support. And finally, a heartfelt shout out to Tuttle Co., the production company working tirelessly behind the scenes, making all the magic happen. Your dedication and expertise have ensured that the symposium ran smoothly. As we conclude this month of inspiring programming dedicated to the experiences of our LGBTQ+ older adults, we want to extend our heartfelt thanks to each and every one of you. Your participation, passion, and commitment to the cause of liberating LGBTQ+ older adults around the world has made this symposium an unforgettable journey. Together, we've explored critical topics, heard from remarkable speakers, engaged in thoughtful conversation that will undoubtedly continue to shape our advocacy and support for LGBTQ+ aging community. Your presence and contribution have absolutely been instrumental in building a more inclusive and affirming future. As we move forward, let's remember that our work doesn't end here. Let's stay connected, stay engaged, and continue the vital work of advocating for and supporting LGBTQ+ aging community members in their pursuit of dignity, respect, and liberation. Thank you all for an incredible month of programming, and we look forward to staying connected and making a positive impact together. Have a good day.